Good evening, Rabbi Feldman. It's a pleasure to have you on the inaugural video podcast of my new series called Journeys of Challenge. And the focus of this series is to identify not necessarily glorious stories and all happy, fluffy, cheery, cotton candy stories, but real life stories with real challenges. Obviously, we don't want to shy away from if there are some happy parts, but we want to study the challenges, and if there are some sadness in there, let's not sugarcoat it, and if there are some happy parts, let's learn from it. And I was really looking forward to having a conversation with you. It's not so much as an interview as I think as a conversation, because besides looking up to you as a rabbinic mentor, which of course I do, and I also think that our community Jacksonville really has a lot to learn from your community, Atlanta. And I think you one time made the comment when you were here visiting, which I think is very accurate, that Jacksonville, at least the Jewish community, is about like 30 years behind Atlanta. So in terms of the growth. So
let me interrupt. By the way, by that I did not mean that there's something retro about Jacksonville. I just meant that in terms of the development, started later, and it's on a path that I saw we were on. We just started earlier. That's all.
Yeah, and that's the way I took it. I didn't take it in a derogatory way. So I just wanted to kind of take a little bit of a dive, a semi-deep dive into your journey. From my understanding is that you were born and raised in Atlanta. Your father was the first rabbi of Beth Jacob. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, my father corrects the record. There was a rabbi for a very, very brief amount of time before my father came, but for all means and purposes, my father was the first hired rabbi who served the congregation formally as a rabbi. Yes, that's good. 1952, and
1952. So we're 2022. So I think it's fair to say that there's a little dynasty going on, or maybe not a little. There's a Kenya Bli Ayin Hara. There's a dynasty going on. So this is a very special dynasty going on, and it's a beautiful. Just as a visitor coming to Atlanta, coming to the Toco Hills community, there's everything from minyanim and shiurim and kolim and Tamima High School and Chai Peking, and the place is just like a Yerva Ein B'Yisrael. But my understanding is, like, when you were growing up, many years and decades ago, it wasn't all like that. So I just wanted to kind of take, like I said, a semi-deep dive, and if you can kind of identify maybe one or two milestones, and saying like how you got from there to here, and maybe if there's some sort of turning points, because I imagine there were some challenges along the way. So if you can kind of perhaps identify maybe one or two of the challenges, some of the turning points, that would enlighten us, because we're going through, obviously, we're going through a journey as well here in Jacksonville, and sometimes it's challenging for us to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think it would be very helpful to hear some insights in that regard.
Sure, yeah, I'll be glad to. First of all, it's an honor to be asked to be on your inaugural podcast, and I'd love to share whatever I can. So, first of all, just general observations about community growth, based only on my own experience here, just watching as a teenager and as a young adult, and then as an assistant rabbi, and then for the last 30-something years, 32 years, I think it's been, as a senior rabbi. Whatever beautiful story there is in Atlanta, every single step of the way came with frustration, with a bit of disagreement, and with some people saying this is not necessary. And in my experience, there is a big challenge to changing the status quo. Um, People by nature, all of us humans by nature, accommodate the status quo. We make adjustments to make things work based on what's going on around us. Whatever the status quo is, we work with it. Someone comes along and says, status quo is inadequate, or we have a new idea, or we have a new institution, or a new program. The first reaction people have is, what do I need that for? If everything was okay till now, then what do we need that for? So there's definitely there's human nature to not necessarily to rally around a next step. Um, there's some resistance. I know that as we've seen what we call progress, at least with the leadership and the lay leadership and the rabbinic leadership called progress, almost every step of the way there were people who said, I'm not in for this. This is not what I was here for. Um, and it was very painful because I know that very certain initiatives that I had to initiate or join in with um, cost relationships. It cost one or two people who said, "Well, this far I'm not willing to go." So, for example, I remember when we realized, I'm jumping right in the middle of the story, but when we realized that we needed to build a freestanding women's mikvah, top of the line freestanding women's mikvah, no longer was it adequate to have a small dank room in the basement of the shul where a very, very few women use the mikveh. But because of the growth of the community, there were, yeah, obviously it was no longer adequate. And we went to build another mikveh. And in order to do that, we had to get zoning. And in order to get zoning, we had to have 3 acres or be connected to a synagogue. And members of my board of the synagogue opposed the zoning measure. We actually hired a lawyer, went to the zoning commission, paid the lawyer to lead us through the whole process, and we have members of my board who actually opposed it. Why? They were devoted, loving, caring members of the synagogue, but mikvah wasn't part of their experience. And I remember one board member saying to me, "Y'all are never going to get that mikvah up." And I said to him, "It's not y'all, it's you and me. We are responsible for the growth of the community." And he never was on board really with this particular thing, and he loved the shul. And matter of fact, fast forward about 10 years, on his deathbed, he called me and he said, "I want to make sure that the synagogue gets a significant gift from me, and I want to make sure it happens while I'm alive." And he wrote me a check for $100,000. So this is a guy who was not in favor of certain steps that we took, and at the same time loved the shul. So growth comes at a cost. It does come at a cost. Just that, and I don't mean to go negative on you, but you introduced this by saying that you want the real picture here. So I'll, I'll just share that. But going back to certain milestones, in a certain sense, um, based on what I was saying, that the status quo always seems to be okay. You learn to live with the status quo. There was a kind of, I would look back on the last 50, 60 years. I've seen it all through one eye or another, whether a child or a teenage eye or an adult eye or a rabbi's eye. Um, there's kind of not a bait and switch, but um, kind of like a change in terms. I know that when my father argued in favor of a Jewish parochial school, we don't use that term anymore, but in those days, the private school was called parochial school. The idea of a Jewish parochial school flew sharply in the face of the whole idea that we want to make it in America, and we want to be accepted, and we want to be assimilated. Not we don't want to lose our Judaism. We just want to be normal. We want to be treated. We don't want to be victims of anti-Semitism. We don't want to be weirdos. And so the idea of creating a Jewish school where kids would not go to public school and they wouldn't go to afternoon school after public school, but they'd go to a Jewish school that had Judaics as part of the curriculum. That was a big deal, and that was a hard-won fight. And at first, it was not very popular. So after a while, it became an established school, and here you have a wonderful graduation. In those days, it was seventh grade was graduation from elementary school, and people would graduate seventh grade, and they were Jewishly educated more than anybody in Atlanta had ever been before. 7 years of Jewish education, 8 years including kindergarten. Then, in the early 70s, my father cooks up this wild scheme. Let's have a Jewish high school for about four boys, or maybe four boys and girls, maybe 4 or 5 boys and girls who might otherwise have to go to an out-of-town yeshiva high school or might not go anywhere. Um, let's do that. And at that point, there was opposition within the Orthodox community, the so-called Orthodox community. People said, we don't want our children to become rabbis, because the idea that you had to go to a fully Jewish school for high school, that was a Jewish value, that's radical. That's like, again, against the status quo, it was radical. It's only not radical against a much bigger picture of what we want for our children. Do we want them to survive all of the temptations and pressures and allure and of the outside world? We want them to have an inner strength, so we got to provide them with that inner strength. And the seventh grade education is great for a seventh grader. It might even be great for a ninth grader to have a seventh grade education only, but it's not great for a 12th grader or for a young adult. It just doesn't work. So, and again, there was always a bit of resistance and a bit of wonder. But the point is, the rules changed, and it's not fun to change the rules. So, for example, our mechitza. I know I'm droning on. You can interrupt me at any time you want, Rabbi Fitch.
No, I was going to get to that. So, well, yeah, please talk about the mechitza.
Our mechitza changed, as far as I can tell, 1, 2, 3, 4, in this building. That's besides the mechitza that we had before this building. Our mechitza changed at least 4 times before the final change. I'm pretty sure the change we have now is final, because it's now as tall as I am. When you stand up, the mechitza is about 6 feet, maybe 58 inches, something like that. And it's a real barrier, although it's a see-through thing. Women can see through. But they can't see through as if they're looking through oxygen. They're looking through some material, so definitely they know they're looking through. But the point is that mechitza went through several changes, and every time it went through a change, the question my father or I had to deal with was, if it was okay till now, why is it not okay now? And the real answer is, without sugarcoating an answer, the real answer is because growth always calls for more. Once you get to a certain level, there's a new horizon, and that new horizon very often calls for more. And it's appropriate not to go all the way to the highest level when you're growing a community. It's appropriate to go a little bit beyond where the community is right now. And once they are able to absorb that and they see the value in it and it becomes part of the status quo, then you change the rules a little bit. You say, hey, guess what? We need something else. So I remember a conversation, for me, it was like almost like prophecy. We had Torah Masorah ran a program in many communities called SEED, SEED, Summer Education Something Develop. I forgot what they called it, but the whole idea was to send yeshiva students led by a married couple to various communities that were not that developed in terms of their adult study or their children's Torah study, and spend a summer of 4 weeks and so on and so forth there. I went to Milwaukee with my wife and led a group of yeshiva students in such a thing. So we had a seed program here in Atlanta. So I came up with the idea, let's call it the summer kollel. Why? Because I wanted people to get to the use of the idea of a kollel. It was nothing other than guys coming in, spending a few hours studying with kids, giving a class or two at night, studying with some adults. But we called it a kollel. So this lay leader says to me, wouldn't it be great if we had this summer kollel for another 11 months? And I said, bingo, that's fantastic. That's exactly what I wanted, was for people to start wanting that kind of a thing. And that up until that time, it had been revolutionary for the idea of having these people live here and not have a pulpit, but actually be devoted to studying Torah and standing for the standard of studying Torah, that adults actually study Torah, and also that they share themselves formally and informally with friends and neighbors, just like you have now in Jacksonville, which is now it's accepted that that's a very useful thing in growing community. And there's no question that having a kollel is an example of making the community an attractive place for more people to come in, to join, to come. I have a business opportunity or a professional opportunity in Atlanta or Jacksonville, and I look around and see what kind of resources are available, and I feel like it takes less courage I don't have to have a pioneer spirit if I know that I've got some level of sophistication as a resource in the community. So my point though is, again, not to be negative, but it came at a cost. The Colo opened in 1987. My father announced his retirement a couple of years before he actually did retire. Retired in 1991. In 1991, I was a relatively young senior rabbi who succeeded him. And in 1995, the first new Orthodox synagogue in Atlanta formed down the street from me, and they called themselves Modern Orthodox. And there's no question about it, the leadership of that new synagogue told me that what sped up the process of people who had been members of my synagogue, who formed another synagogue, what sped it up was the creation of the Kollel, because in so doing, we introduced a new standard in the community. Now, there were apprehensions. For example, people said, we're trying to make everybody black hat. Not true. We were trying simply to provide Torah study to people. But it happened to be the people we found who were most willing to relocate to Atlanta, who had fire in the belly, who actually wanted to share their Judaism with other people, happened to wear a black hat during davening on Shabbos. But we were not saying that you have to be a black hat, nor do we want you to become black hat. We want you to become whatever you think works for you. But the point is that as we grew, we also lost some people who were apprehensive, because being Shabbos observant was the highest level of accomplishment for a layperson. And now we were saying, well, actually, you have to study Torah as an adult on a regular basis. So we're creating this base medrash, and we encourage people to come and study. So again, the milestones always came after one milestone was accomplished. And there were always, and this is a very positive thing, I look back on our history, there were always a small cadre of lay people who were not popular in their initiative, but they were determined, who stood for the next step. So when we went into a high school, which was radical, as I said before, we went into it was a boys and girls high school where boys and girls were separated for Limudei Kodesh, for Judaics, not for general studies at that point. And when that idea was fronted, the Federation leadership was not in favor of it. It's you're imposing another institution on the community, and it's not necessary. And from their point of view, it isn't necessary, because they were devoted and committed and passionate Jews, and they never went to a Jewish high school, so you don't need it, right? Little did they know that not that many years later, they'd be promoting the idea of Jewish high school also, albeit not Orthodox. But then all of a sudden, everybody had to have a Jewish high school if you wanted to have a Jewish future. I've had Reform rabbis tell me straight out, they would love to create a Reform Kollel, to have Reform rabbinic students. So I said to them, there's only one problem. You got to have people who absolutely feel like it's worth giving up comfort and worth giving up a career and worth giving up compensation to be able to come to town and share themselves. That level of Mesiras Nefesh comes with a certain devotion to a Torah that's true. If the Torah is not true, it's just a good idea that happens to work at the time until it's changed into another idea that works at that time. So you're not going to find anybody who's willing to change their careers in order to promote it. So I told them, good luck. I would love you to have a Reform Kollel, but it's never going to happen. You're just not going to find people who are going to give up their quality of life in order to provide, to share themselves with the community. Anyway, so go ahead.
Yes. So this is fascinating. So I think one key milestone that you just mentioned was the opening of the Kollel in the early '90s, and you said about 4 years later there was this new shul that opened up, and they identified as more modern Orthodox, and they felt that Betchenko was becoming too black hat, and because of the kollel. So I guess my question to you, looking back, is do you think maybe the opening of the kollel could have been done a little different? Perhaps there was a way not to alienate them, or is the opening of a kollel inevitably going to alienate some people?
It's a great question. It's a very good question, and I can't answer with authority because the theoretical thing of could it have, what would have happened if. But it's a very important question. I believe not, and here's my answer is based on this. Meaning, I don't believe it could have been done in a way that would not have alienated some people. The evidence I have to say that is that this is the kollel that, when it opened, spent 90% of its time with non-Orthodox people, and was extremely popular. The broader Atlanta Jewish community was, I would say, almost incredulous as to how quickly they became accepted, and it became normative to have a lunch and learn, or to have a program, or for singles who were not observant to attend a Shabbaton, sponsored at the JCC, which was by the JCC, which was not a religious organization, it's simply a Jewish cultural organization. So what that tells me is that these people were capable of relating to all kinds of Jews with all backgrounds without imposing any expectations on them, just simply showing them love. But they came from a black hat yeshiva, right? At that time in Atlanta, I will tell you that my father and I strongly resisted using the term right wing, left wing, modern, or Haredi, or anything like that, because we felt that using those terms pigeonholes people in a certain spot in their growth, and then forces them not to deal with who they are in terms of their relationship with God and other people. In other words, we're not a political party. It's not like, oh, I'm a Democrat, therefore I have to be in favor of, open borders. Oh, I'm Haredi, therefore I believe certain. No. You're not Haredi. You're a Jew, and a Jew has to deal with, what does God expect of me? What do I know about myself? What have I discovered? What's my next step? Do I want a next step? And that's not a Haredi thing. That's just a Jewish thing. So we strongly work against that kind of a thing of black hat. But there is, nevertheless, when you introduce a new standard of Torah study into a community, and with role models, the unstated implication is that we want everybody to be like them. And so there's not much you can do about that. People who are apprehensive, went elsewhere. They're sincere, devoted Jews, but they did not, they weren't ready for this kind of a thing. So growth always comes at a cost. It also comes at tremendous gains. I mean, I cannot tell you how many Jews who we never ever would have expected transformed their lives, not just because of the kollel, because of the combination of the school, working with the kids, and just the community, even social programs in the community, in the synagogue that brought people together. I remember in the 90s we had a casino night. I think it was on Purim or on Hanukkah, I forget which. And we set it up so that halakhically there's no real gambling, because, as you know, gambling provides some halakhic questions. But there's a way of having fun and actually winning and losing without violating halakha. And I remember that to me the beauty of the affair was that we had rabbis, and we had non-observant people who didn't keep kosher, and people who kept kosher, people who kept Shabbos, all in one room playing with each other. Now that breaks down barriers, So that's it's very important for people not to get preoccupied with titles and preoccupied with positioning themselves in a certain place. We don't do that. Nobody says, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. I'm not going to lose a pound more. Don't ever talk to me about it. I know the doctor says I need to lose 50 pounds, but I'm going to lose 10, and don't talk to me. You don't do that. Or I'm going to get a trainer, and I'm going to learn how to swim, but I'm only going to learn how to do the breaststroke. Don't bother me with the backstroke. I'm not doing that. Nobody does that. So in Judaism, We don't do that either. In Judaism, we say, I have a relationship with a real creator, and he gave me a message. And I want to deal with my relationship with that creator. Where am I? What works for me? What doesn't work for me? And that's a relationship. It's like a marriage.
Right.
Anyway, I'm getting on my soapbox, so stop me, Rabbi.
No, this is great stuff. Great stuff. I want to go back to something you spoke about earlier, though. You spoke about an example of a milestone on the Mechitza. You said there were 4 iterations. I'm not exactly sure where we are in Jacksonville at Eitz Chaim, but recently we introduced the Mechitza initiative this past year, and we're in the process of raising the Mechitza. And obviously this is an emotional topic, and it's potentially a divisive topic. I say potentially because I'm doing my best to build consensus on the issue in terms of educating people, in terms of making people understand that that it doesn't have to be a divisive issue, and we can all grow together. We may not all agree about it, but I just want to ask you, I guess, from a couple different demographics. So one demographic, I guess, and particularly I've heard this from women, and I don't want to be too presumptuous, but I want to imagine that you may have heard this as well, and say, by raising the Mechitza, they feel like a barrier is put in front of their face, and they feel like shut out of the service. And they feel like if the synagogue is supposed to be a place of outreach, they feel that this is a statement that they're less, they are less, or we're being less inclusive. And I'm just curious if you had that as those voices were, you made it to your office, your desk, and how you responded to that, and if not, I'm just curious how you would respond to that.
Yeah, these are great things. So first of all, you should. I'll say that. Please forgive the patronizing tone here. You should know that anything you say, and anything that they say, and anything you say back to what they say, and anything they say back to what you say, none of it is original. It's all been said before in every community, and we've been through that discussion many times. I will tell you anecdotally something that broke my heart and caused me to publicly retreat in an article that I wrote in the synagogue bulletin in the good old days when we used to print a bulletin and send it out in the mail, and people would get it and read it and hold it in their hands, not before the internet. So it was 1995, as a matter of fact. And I had appointed a Mechitza committee to look at raising the Mechitza. And I get a request one day from 4 women for a meeting. And they come in to my office and they say, with great respect, and I'd grown up with them because I lived here, so I knew these people. Rabbi, you think that because we're not fully observant that this synagogue isn't relevant to us and that we haven't gained from this synagogue. You don't know how our lives have changed from being part of the synagogue. And we may not be observant, but look at our children. They're much more observant than we are. So one of them said, my son is Shomer Shabbos because of the synagogue. I'm not, but there's all. And now you're taking an initiative and you're saying that you're going to be catering to a different group than us. We're the ones who built this show, and we're the ones who still gain from the show, and you're going to leave us behind. It broke my heart. I argued with them. I think I said some very good things, but I couldn't. I said to myself, I haven't done my homework, because if the people who have built this show think that I'm leaving them behind, it's not ready. We're going to have to delay this. And I wrote an article about it. And I said, I'm not doing it now. We're not going to do it because we're not ready. Several years later, I did it, and I had the same kind of discussions, the same painful thing. And I knew that absolutely I was doing the right thing to initiate this thing. Now, what changed? First of all, the woman who told me that her son was Shomer Shabbos because of the show, I went back to her and I said to her, do you understand that I have to make sure to provide for him, for his and his wife's next step in their Judaism? And let's face it, the low mechitza in a circular shul, let's say it's kosher by certain opinions. Nobody ever said everybody liked it or everybody agreed with it. But that lo mechitza makes the following statement: we are an Orthodox shul in an environment in which people don't understand Orthodoxy. So we're going to give you a mechitza, but it's not that bad. That statement is appropriate in an environment where no one is Orthodox other than the rabbi, which happened here in the shul for like 15 years. But that statement is no longer appropriate when you're dealing with a group of Jews who are going to be the leaders, lay leaders, who are going to be leading the way by example in their commitment to Shabbos and kosher and Torah study and so on and so forth. They no longer need a mechitza that says, don't worry, it's not so bad. Now, the women who feel isolated, who feel walled out, I'm sure you're working on designs that minimally wall them out. Number two is it always, against the backdrop of what people are used to, it really does feel awful. But I will tell you that I've had women here who told me they're not coming anymore because of the mechitza that we put in, which is, by the way, there's more visual connection to the men's side with this mechitza than there ever was with the lower mechitza, which was solid up till like, a little above waist high. It was solid. Now the thing is almost down to the floor. You can see everything from the women's side. We have it's uplit on the men's side so that the reflection of the light blocks full access. You can still see things through it, but not that well. The point is, I've had women come to me and say, Rabbi, I thought I wouldn't be able to take it. It reminds me of Auschwitz. They've told me it reminds me of Auschwitz. Try being a rabbi who's putting up an Auschwitz reminder memorial in the show with a mechitza. And they said to me, and now I see I'm doing fine. I can do fine. I can still connect to the dominant. Does everybody like it? No. But here's the thing. The show has always got to be a place that's hospitable to the most committed. This to me is a rule, and it's socially, it doesn't fly. But in terms of a growth-oriented organization, if the show says by its behavior, we are here for the people who are the least committed, the people who are most committed have to find some way of accommodating themselves, you're going to be sending them away, and then you lose the beauty of people coming together under one roof. You always want to have the most passionate and most committed feeling comfortable, and then helping them relate with tolerance, with love, and helping people who are less committed understand that even the committed people have their own challenges. This leads me to go ahead. Go ahead.
So let me ask you a question. So let me talk about the more committed demographic. So did you have a situation where the more committed demographic was frustrated that the transition to the new mechitza was not happening quick enough, and how did you, and if that did occur, like how did you address that?
Okay, so I had very few of the most committed who complained about the mechitza. They trusted the rabbi that if the rabbi has a less than ideal mechitza, the rabbi knows what he's doing, and at the right time, the rabbi will take initiative to change it. And this was an important point that I made as we went ahead about dealing with the improved mechitza. I said to them, I am not a politician. I do not respond to pressure groups. You think I'm doing this because somebody's making me because they are upset? No, they actually haven't said a word about it. They're willing to follow whatever I do, whatever compromise mechitza I might have. And I'm doing this because I think it's healthy for everyone. I'm not doing this because one group wants it. I don't listen to one group against another group. And that I made that point several times because the less committed thought, oh, the rabbi is just trying to cater to his new constituency, the ones who are more committed. And I was not catering to a constituency. I was simply saying, okay, my job is to coach the growth of Judaism. And as a coach, I think this is the next step in order for the synagogue to say, we're not a place that is only for those who need compromise. We are a place for the most committed also. And we want everyone to come together so that the passion that comes with growth and with non-compromise can be shared by everyone. So I can tell you now that the mechitza, from the time that I announced this last initiative to the time we actually opened the shul with a brand new mechitza, was 9 long, painful years. That doesn't mean we didn't have fun in shul. It didn't mean we didn't have great programs. It didn't mean we didn't have great sermons. It didn't mean we didn't have great Yom Tov. But 9 years of back and forth and frustration and this design and that design and this doesn't work and that doesn't work. And this committee member frustrated and he quit and he resigned. And this person flying out to Los Angeles and finding another mechitza over there that seems to be better than the one we're working on. 9 years. And the point is, during those 9 years, I can identify 3 members who resigned the show, which is pretty good. Meaning I expected a lot more. 3 members who resigned the show. I think after the mechitza came in, there might have been some people who didn't tell me that they resigned because of that. They might have told me some other reason that they resigned, but it might have been that it helped them. But I say to myself, every resignation is painful because I really want to be a leader for everyone, and I believe I in the community have something to offer every Jew, as you do. But at the same time, it's a price that's necessary to pay. The shul cannot always be catering to the people who are uncomfortable but will put up with a mechitza. It needs to also cater to people who are totally comfortable. By the way, the greatest pressure that I ever experienced to raise the mechitza came from women. I had women who came to me and said, Rabbi, when I come to shul late, I don't feel like standing up and davening Shemona Esrei while everybody's staring at me. I need a better mechitza. And I had women who told me, I am not coming to shul with this mechitza. I will not be coming. They weren't threatening me. They were simply saying to me, I'm not comfortable. And then I was creating a reason for people to look elsewhere for their spiritual nourishment. And what kind of a shul says we're not here to nourish everybody? So that means we also have to take on standards that will nourish even people who are totally comfortable with mechitza. So it's a juggling act. The rabbi's got to deal with all this. It's not easy, but lay people have to be compassionate. They have to think beyond their own needs. Every single member of a synagogue is building the shul for the next generation. Is building the shul for the Jew he doesn't know or she doesn't know. The shul is not there for me. I am here for the shul, and the shul stands for the Torah and for God. And I want to make sure when I'm gone or when I move on to some other city that this shul is still a viable entity for someone else. So we should stop calculating how we feel about things in the shul based on how I or my spouse or my children feel, and instead think about what's good for the broader community and what's good for the people that I don't even know who might come here if this shul continues to grow. It's a very important point. Shul politics are not politics in the sense of Republicans and Democrats and, voting for whatever is good for your district. That's not how shuls should go. Shuls are not about you. They're just not about you. They're about a big picture. They're about God. That's a very big picture.
Right. That's a very refreshing and large way of thinking, to think about that the shul's not there to serve me, and it takes takes some courageous thinking, and it's not easy, but it's great to hear you to mention that.
Yeah, no, it's in general, some of our great teachers of previous generations have told us, and this is an important point, that when the Torah tells you not to be selfish, the Torah also means in the spiritual sense. Its selfishness is a problem not only in the physical sense, but it's also in the spiritual sense. Don't have your own Shabbos, don't have your own kashrus, but actually live your Judaism in a way that can be shared with others. And that means sometimes doing things that aren't just for you, and that doesn't necessarily make you comfortable. Come to shul, not so you can daven. Come to shul so someone else can daven, because you're there, enhancing the environment. You come to make a difference to someone else. Changes the whole world.
So the paradigm of someone saying like, "What am I getting out of shul?"
Right,
Or the shul meeting my needs?
right.
You would say to that is the wrong question.
So I would say, first of all, your needs have to be met, but that's not. This is not like there's a golf club, and when you join a golf club, your golf needs have to be met, and if you can't get enough tee time, and if you can't, then if they don't shave the grass so that the rough is the rough and the green is the green, then you're not getting what you paid your dues for. A shul is not that way. Yeah, certainly you have to have your needs met. You have to be able to relate to the message of the show. You have to be, but that's not the goal. It's not, you don't pay dues in order to get an exchange of commodity. I pay you, you give me. You join a show in order to strengthen a community so that the community itself stands for the highest level of a relationship with God possible. And then everybody can choose for themselves how much they want to get from being associated with that community. But the reason I joined the show is to strengthen the community. I'm sure you have people who come to your show who daven who don't join the show, right? And you don't tell them you can't come. Where's your membership card? Because meaning the reason you join the show is because it's a purely voluntary act, strengthening the community by I am here giving my money and giving my presence to the show, and now the show is better off than it was before. That's why I joined the show. It's not an exchange of tit for tat.
Well said. Well said. I want to kind of pivot to another area, if I can.
Sure.
Talking about journeys of challenge. Talk about like a spiritual midlife crisis. Many of us, if we've gone to yeshiva or have a yeshiva background, or if we're newly observant, or whatever phase we were in our early 20s, perhaps more inspired, and we hit our late 30s, early 40s, 50s, whatever it is, and just like in the general world, there's this concept called the midlife crisis. There's I think a Jewish midlife crisis. The studying Torah doesn't sound as jazzy as it used to. Coming to shul, is not. At this point, many of us have, we have wives, we have children already. So we're kind of already going through the Orthodox Jewish motions of life, but I think for many of us, our neshamas, our souls are kind of somewhat flat. So I guess my general question to you is what kind of guidance can you give? I mean, we're talking about people that are technically, part of the Orthodox Jewish community, but to kind of keep the spark alive. I mean, I don't know if there's one magic pill, so to speak, but if there's one, if there's just a insight you can share to kind of help keep the spark of, keep people engaged in the best way possible.
Yeah, great question. Great question. It's really important, and every show has a constituency that seems to be experiencing that kind of it might not be midlife, but some kind of a crisis in which it's okay. I got this far, and I used to be excited, but now I'm just not inspired. So it's a real problem. So first of all, I have some bad news for people. Anybody who is inspired is not inspired by something out there. Inspiration is an optical illusion. You think something inspired you. No, you got inspired because you're a person willing to be inspired. If you're a person who's unwilling to be inspired, ain't nothing in the world going to inspire you. The best speaker, the best story, the best biography, whatever it is, nothing will inspire you if you're not inspirable. So the first thing a person has to understand is inspiration and growth comes from within. There's an optical illusion that it comes from without, but nobody ever grew or was inspired unless they themselves were willing to let something out there make a difference for them. And that's number one. We have to take responsibility to be inspirable, to be open to that. But very often we give it up. That's number one. Number two is the reason that we go through these midlife crises is because the nourishment that we've given ourselves was adequate up until now, but we haven't started nourishing ourselves for a new station in life. So, okay, I'm an Orthodox Jew. I graduated high school. Maybe I did my gap year in Israel. Then I came back and I finished my degree, and I became a professional. And then I get married, and I have a Shabbos observant house. That's exciting. Wow, I'm actually running a Shabbos observant house, and I have a Shabbos table, and my children are going to Jewish school. That's exciting. But then, if a person does not take the time or take the effort to nurture him, what's the next horizon? Okay, you've done that, been there, done that. After a while, it gets old. So a person needs to make goals for him or herself. And they don't have to be lofty goals, but goals that are measurable, so that you say, you know what, I'm not inspired really now, but I've also not taken any new ground in any area of my life. I'm doing the same old thing. So I normally, for the last 10 years, been coming to Shul on Shabbos every single week. I never miss it, but I always come 25 minutes late. Make it a goal to come 20 minutes late. Believe it or not, those 5 minutes, won't change anything. But the fact that you're up to something, that you actually said, I'm going to measure if I can beat my habit and I can create a new thing. It's not even about, but you know, it's not, I even said to my congregation once, don't make it that you come 5 minutes early. Just plan now to come always 5 minutes later. You're in control of what you do. Don't do it out of habit. Choose what you're doing. So the point is, it's very important for people to take responsibility, to give themselves a goal. And not everybody in the world is going to grow from Torah studies. Some people have learning disabilities. Some people have intellectual limitations. Some people are just bored they don't really care what the Gemara says, and they're not trained to care. Okay, you'll get to that later. Try something else. Try coming to the Shabbos table with a new Torah thought this week. Try coming home from Shul with your version of what you got from the rabbi, from the way rabbis taught. Try seeing if you could become a little bit more proficient in giving tzedakah. You don't have to give all of your money away, or give, if you're not giving 10%, okay, give 0.5% more than you're giving. Be responsible for it. Start being creative. The point is that boredom comes from not being creative. And when you're creative, even in a small area, the success that comes from the creativity actually lights your fire. That's what I've found. But it takes a person being willing to be responsible for thinking it through. So that's what I would say.
So I heard two things. I think they're both terrific points. So A is inspiration comes from the inside, like the Torah says, "Beficha b'vavcha asa."
Very good, very good.
It's an optical illusion to think that you gotta get externally stimulated, go to wherever.
Rabbi Faisal Krohn has got to speak to me, and if he speaks and yells loud enough and tells enough stories, then I'll be a better Jew. Yeah,
and B is always to try to set new goals for ourselves, no matter how small. How small. So, I guess I just want to kind of conclude our conversation with a timely issue, and in terms of like spiritual stagnation, how we lead to spiritual, I guess, rejuvenation. That's Elul 2022. So there's a lot of noise out there, in life. There's a lot of distractions, and Rosh Hashanah is just like a Sunday evening in September. It's but as Jews, El is an important month, and Rosh Hashanah is an important important days. And I was just want to know if you can give some I don't know if it's best practices, or you spoke about goals, which sound very good, but El 2022. I mean, there's a lot of we're I don't know if I can even say the word. I'm so kind of nervous to say the word post, but I'll just go on a limb and say post-COVID. Post-COVID. But there's a lot of perhaps cheshbon nefesh, reflection involved as we're nearing once again the day of when we're going to be judged. But I just want to know if you can perhaps share some insight how to for the for us from the biggest scholar to the any lay person, how to maximize Elul in a practical way.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So I'm going to rapid fire. I will not elaborate on all these things. I'll just tick off a couple of things that I think will loosen thinking and give a person a chance to have a meaningful time leading up to Rosh Hashanah. Number one is drop the guilt. There's no guilt involved in tshuva at all. There's responsibility, which is totally different. Guilt is a selfish preoccupation with how bad I am. I'm no good. I did wrong things, or the other way. It's the opposite. Person has a problem. I don't feel guilty. So what am I supposed to do? The answer is it's not about guilt. It's about being responsible. Where can I be responsible in my relationship with God where I wasn't responsible before? That's number one. So stay away from feeling guilty or trying to feel guilty. And if you do feel guilty or inadequate, that's not what the goal is over here. God says, I love you and I want you back. I want a relationship with you. That's what it's all about. That's number one. Number two, we're going to be saying on Rosh Hashanah, during the 10 days of repentance, write us in the book of life, O King, who desires life. So we have to ask ourselves, why do we want our lives? I know we have an instinct to it, we don't want to die, but what do we want our lives to be about? So rather than make the month of Elul be about the month of Elul, make the month of Elul be about what you want your life to be about. What do you want really? If you had a choice, what would you want your life to be dedicated to? Would it be caring for others? That doesn't mean that you quit your job and you become Mother Teresa. I'm talking about what do you want to be focused on all year long? Give me life so that I can do what? Care for others, so I can learn how to pray better, so I can learn how to study Torah better, so I could have a better relationship with my spouse, so I could be a little bit more involved with my children, so I could be more honest in my business, so I could walk around in my interaction in the non-Jewish world in a way that brings credit to God and the Jewish people, because I'm a committed, consistent, honest, loyal, responsible, pleasure to deal with, right? Or I'm a jerk, right? So what do I want my life to be like? So the point is that during Elul, we have a chance to say, okay, let's think about ourselves. What do I want? What do I want to devote my life to? What do I want this year to be about? What am I, come next year, would I have pleasure if I said I became a better husband? I'm a good husband anyway, but I learned how not to snap at my wife when she says, can you please take out the garbage? Or I learned how to voluntarily say to even when I'm tired, say to my 8-year-old, let's go out and have a catch, or whatever it is. I worked on becoming a better father. Am I a bad father? No, but I worked on becoming a better father. That's what I want my life to be about. I want my life to be about, I love my kids and they know I love them. Not just that they believe I love them, but they know I love them, etc. So a person can ask himself or herself that question. And then Elul becomes about, okay, once you set up an area that you're interested in, you start noticing that area much more than if you just have a broad thing of I want to be a better person or a better Jew, because once you make a commitment to improvement in a particular area, all of a sudden everything shows up, the good and the bad, and you start noticing things, and now you have a project. Nothing like being involved in a project.
That's great advice. Thinking about what kind of lives we want to have,
right,
as we approach the time to plead for our life is very appropriate and meaningful. So I want to take the opportunity to thank you, Rabbi Feldman, for giving us some of your time. I know your time is very precious, and I want to thank you for taking the time and coming on our inaugural podcast here. And your insights were steeped with wisdom, and I'm sure all of our listeners will be very enriched from hearing your comments and advice and insights. So I want to thank you on behalf of all of our listeners here, and want to wish you a meaningful Elul as well, and upcoming Ksiva Chasima Tova, and from our community to yours, Hashem should just continue blessing you to continue going from strength to strength.
Amen. Thank you for the honor of being part of this podcast, and I'm looking forward to seeing the other contributions. Because I think it's a great concept that you came up with to really hear other voices and to bring them to bear on issues of the day. And I'm looking forward to seeing the other contributions. So thank you for letting me be part of this.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to keeping up with you, and keep up the great work, Jacksonville. Hopefully we'll close the gap.
Close the gap. Yeah.
Only be 25 years behind. But you set up a great roadmap for the Southeast here.
Yeah, you just want to be one step. You don't want to be behind anybody. You want to be one step ahead of where you were last year. That's all.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Be well.
Good year to you, Michelle, and to everybody in it. Be well.
All the best.
Bye-bye.